From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast episode. This episode is really drilling down into something that I thought about or have spent some time thinking about recently. And I did a little short post on this on LinkedIn last week, just a few days ago. But I really wanted to expand on it and dig just a little deeper, kind of unpack it a little bit more. The quote that I shared on LinkedIn is, "If you never grow, you won't build much influence with someone who does." And I think that's so critical because a lot of times we don't think about ourselves and our potential and our opportunities in terms of something that must be developed, that must be cultivated. We often think about ourselves from our perspectives, and we think about our potential, and so then we think, well, the opportunity just should come to me because I'm capable of that opportunity. I'm capable of maximizing that opportunity. And this would have been me. Even as well, probably 10 or 15 years ago, I can remember wanting a different position in an organization and feeling like I'm ready for this opportunity. I am the best person for this opportunity. I'm, you know, the one who deserves this opportunity, and I can do a better job than the person who was doing it. And I remember having that thought but not really connecting the dots between wanting that possibility and that opportunity, but not having intentionally developed myself for that opportunity. And it's so true that so much of the time when opportunities come along, we have to prepare before the opportunity comes along. We have to be preparing now for the opportunities tomorrow, because when the opportunity comes tomorrow, if we're not ready for it, we're not going to be able to take advantage of it, or we might miss out on it completely, or we might get it and we might not be successful at it. And so, thinking about that and just thinking about my mindset back then was I didn't understand why I wasn't being given the opportunity. But just because you want the opportunity doesn't mean you're ready for the opportunity. And here's the thought that I wanted to share. If you never spend time investing in yourself and your growth, you're not going to be able to build a lot of influence with someone who does invest in themselves and their growth, because they value growth. And if you haven't demonstrated that you also value that, you're not going to be able to build a lot of influence with someone who values that. Because so much of the time we're trying to impress someone. Let's use a work example. Maybe you are ready for more responsibility, maybe a formal position of authority at work, and you want the opportunity, you're ready to step up, you think that you want to do a good job, you can be successful. But if you're trying to impress someone with your ability to do that opportunity, you have to develop it. You have to develop yourself. You have to demonstrate that you have that potential and that ability before the opportunity will come your way. So much of the time we sit around waiting on that opportunity. But the truth is, if we're developing ourselves now, we're not just saying, hey, I'm ready for more. We're showing that we're capable of doing more. And you have to put the work in before, right? It's kind of like pretty much any job in the world. You have to go and you have to do the work before you get a paycheck, a payday, right? I've certainly never worked in a job that you got paid before you actually do the work. In a regular job, you go and you do the work and you clock in or you clock out or your salary. But at the end of the 2-week pay period, that's when you get your check. And that's just kind of that same principle, but expand that over the course of our career. Put the work in on the front end, right? It's like you have to go study and take the exams for college before you get the college degree, right? You have to put the work in. You have to go to the gym and put the time in and work out before you can benefit from the fitness that comes with it. And this principle applies in so many dimensions of our life, but sometimes we don't necessarily connect the dots to apply that to our future career opportunities. Because when we start to grow, even just a little bit, or maybe we're just, wanting to grow in responsibility or opportunities, we think we're ready, but maybe we haven't yet put the work in. And that comes down to, what development have we done for ourselves? What personal growth books have you read? What leadership books are you reading? Are you talking about what you've learned and how you apply it? Are you sharing what you're learning? So that these are just some basic ways that we can show, hey, I'm developing myself, and that means I have potential because I'm willing to put the work in, even though I haven't felt the benefit yet, right? That's always the thing about sacrifices. We feel the loss first. We have to give up something in order to go up, but it's not go up and then give up. It's give up and then go up. And there again, sometimes it's easy to miss that principle and just say, you know what, I'm worthy of more money, right? I can remember thinking that in the early days of my career, thinking I do a good job and I work hard, and I did have a good work ethic and I did work hard. But it's easy to go around thinking, we judge ourselves by our intentions and then other people by their actions, right? So we typically think, well, I intend to develop myself, so I'm worth more now. And or maybe, hey, I do a good job, so I'm worth more money. Well, in truth, you have to put the work in on the front end. And yeah, absolutely. Maybe you are deserving of a pay raise or a future opportunity. But what I'm saying is, rather than sit around and wait on that to just come and find you, one of the proactive steps you can take is to be developing yourself on the front end. And that just comes down to, again, I've said it over and over, but that intentional growth in saying, okay, here's my personal development plan. I'm not waiting on someone else to tell me I need a development plan. I remember working in one organization, and I had been there maybe a year, maybe a little bit more. And my leader just came, or sent, I think sent an email probably back in those days, and said, hey, can you just send me a quick list of the things that you've done to develop yourself in the past year? And she was the first person who'd ever asked me that. Well, the cool thing was I had a list. Like I had a Word document that I had typed up of classes and courses I'd taken, and things I had signed up for and elected to go and develop myself, and books that I'd read back then. So I had just a list of saying, hey, this is how I've invested in myself over the past year. And the cool thing was is she was asking that because she knew that at some level, people who develop themselves are willing to put the work in do have that potential for more responsibility. And she was looking at it at a high level view of just saying, hey, if this person is growth oriented, that could change the trajectory of what opportunities this organization has to offer them. But don't miss it. I was developing myself even way before she asked for that. And I still have that document here somewhere, and I've got one for many years after that. I used to, in fact, I think I kept a document like that every year until I quit working in the in the real job, quote unquote. And these days, I just put it in an Excel spreadsheet because I'm tracking things like books and books read and podcast, things like that. So I do it a little bit differently now than just an actual straight up list, but don't miss the opportunity to be developing yourself now. And yes, absolutely keep a record of that. If nothing else, it's an incredible feeling to go back at the end of the year and go, man, look at all of the ways I've invested in myself and my future and my potential this year. How many books you've read, classes you've been to, courses, whatever your way of developing yourself is, make sure you're capturing that, because that is absolutely proof where you can, the next job opportunity you have, or the next job interview you have, you're not just going to an interview. You show up with a binder that says, hey, here's the certificates I've read, here's the books I've read, and you are prepared to talk about what you learned from each of those development opportunities. Don't just show up with a list. Be prepared to talk about what you took away from those opportunities, even if it's just one nugget or one gem from each book you read or each podcast you've listened to. But I guarantee you, if you show up at any regular interview for a job and you have a list of things that you say, hey, this is how I've invested in myself and my growth over the past year, you are going to stand out compared to someone who doesn't have that. And you're just waving a big old flag saying, I value myself and my growth and my potential. And that's going to allow you to maximize your influence with someone who values that. Now, if they're a person that doesn't value that, you probably don't want that job anyway. If they're not a person and a leader who values you investing in you and your success, then yeah, you're probably not going to be very happy in that role long term anyway. If you're growth oriented and the position is in an organization that's not growth oriented, it's not going to be a good fit. So that would absolutely be a flag for you to say, hey, if they don't value this, then I wouldn't probably enjoy working here anyway. And if they do value it, it sets you worlds apart from most people. Because a lot of people these days have, some experience and a degree, right? Those are all competency things. And there's nothing wrong with having those. I mean, certainly competency is very important, but it's when you show up with a list of here's how I've invested in myself and my growth, that's character based because no one paid you to go do those opportunities, right? You just took a proactive approach to your growth and your potential and said, I'm going to develop myself on the front end so that I can get paid for it, whether that's financially or otherwise later. And I forget who says it, but I think it's John Maxwell who says, when opportunity knocks, it's too late to prepare, right? And that's kind of that same principle of saying we have to be intentional, number one, about developing ourselves every single day in small ways. You don't have to spend all day reading a book, but make sure that you have a plan to stay on track. And I've shared with you many times before, one of the goals I set for myself is approximately a book a week or 50 nonfiction books a year. Could I do more? Yeah, probably so. But that's just one way. If I just take one thing from every book that I read once a week, that's 50 ways, 50 nuggets of gems of information or quotes or something that I've learned. I will be in a different place in a year from now. Because if I just learn 50 new things between this time and next year, I'll change my level of awareness some way or another. I don't always know what I'm going to get from the book. I don't always know if I'm going to enjoy the book, but I pretty much get something out of every book. Now, maybe there again, maybe you're not a big reader. Maybe it's videos or podcasts or, there are so many ways to develop yourself. But take away from this podcast episode number one, don't neglect the opportunity to demonstrate that you value investing in yourself and your growth. And don't miss the opportunity to capture that down, whether it's a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet you can print out later. It doesn't have to be fancy, just some way that you can capture that down, bullet points, and then maybe some of the gems that you mined from each of those books you read or podcasts you watched, something that you can flip back and go, oh, yeah, this is what I learned. And the other cool thing is if you capture some of those quotes or gems or thoughts about what you're reading, it is so cool to be able to go back and read that again in a year or two or maybe more and go, wow, that's where I was back then. And it's almost a visible way. It's kind of like the door jam where kids would grow up and you would, every year you'd mark with how tall they were with a pencil. This is kind of the same concept. You'll be able to go back in a couple years and go, wow, that's how short I was then. And I've grown so much more figuratively since then. So until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.